Welcome to Tips for the Transition, where we have deep, meaningful conversations about life. We talk about how significant changes like divorce, grief, and career change can affect us, our family, our relationships, and our work, and how to move beyond them. I'm your host, Maria Tomás-Keegan, certified career and life coach for women, and I'm here to support you through the messy seasons of life so you can answer big questions like who am I now and how do I move on from here? If you're ready to consider new options, be inspired, and meet incredible women who are on this life journey with us, you're in the right place. You'll find something in each episode to give you hope and encourage you to move from panic to powerful, from rocky to resilient, and from upside down to right side up. This is Tips for the Transition. Thank you so much for joining us. This is Tips for the Transition, the Career Roadmap podcast, and we come to you live every week on LinkedIn, Facebook, and YouTube here at this time. And it's also on all your favorite audio channels. I'm Maria Tomás-Keegan. I'm a career and life coach for women, and my vision is to create resources to help women navigate career and life challenges with more ease and grace, and to know that they're not alone. So each weekly conversation we have here is intended to help women around the world become more confident, more resilient, and brave in their career and life. So if something strikes a chord with you, please take a look at the links below the video for various ways to contact me or my guest, and you will be able to get more information and maybe continue the conversation. So today we're going to talk about a subject that women say is important, but many of us do very little to practice it so that it can actually make our lives better. So what am I talking about? I'm talking about self-care. So are you a woman who carries the weight of the world on your shoulders? Maybe you are driven, yet overwhelmed. And maybe you even take pride in the fact that you can do it all. Well, you're not alone. You are in excellent company. I know I've ticked off all those boxes in my past corporate career life, and so did my next guest. And that's why I invited her to join with us today. So let me tell you a little bit about her. Angela McKay is an HR executive, wife, and mom who learned the hard way that she needed to prioritize herself amidst all the busyness. And as a result, she became committed to taking the cliche out of self-care. I love that. Think about that phrase, the cliche out of self-care, and help others to put themselves first. She works with overwhelmed, driven, and do-it-all women to help them set aside more meaningful time for themselves. So we call this episode, How to Make Self-Care Impactful. So let me introduce you to Angela McKay. Hello, Angela. Welcome, and thank you.
Thank you. I am so grateful to be spending this time with you.
I'm glad. This is such an important topic, and I think it doesn't get enough play. I think it gets kind of shuffled off to Buffalo. So I'd love to start with you telling us how you got started in this line of business. Tell us what led you here.
I'll be honest, it was a bit of an evolution. So, I mean, it's not only a life coach, but an intuitive life coach and in the space of self-care. On the one side, I've always been the person that people come to help them really talk to themselves, so they'll talk to me about what's going on, and I really help them to just gain some perspective and hear what their inner voice is telling them. I then went into a career in HR. So like you said, I'm an HR executive. It's a very people-centric profession, and I enjoy it greatly, but I knew that just something was missing. So I got to do, mentoring and training and guiding, and I love all those pieces, but I really wanted to work with people on a holistic level, the whole person. There was then a point for me, it was a few years ago, a friend reached out and they said they knew somebody, a life coach, an executive life coach, who was offering a free session. And part of me, I said to myself, well, I'd love to do that. But the louder part of me said, I would love to coach. So I ended up signing up with her as a coach, and I used that coaching to get myself really set up in the coaching space. So I had the natural ability and the intuitive ability. I had the HR training, and then I worked to get my life coach certification behind me. And it was really within that coaching experience that I started to learn more and more for myself how I had spent quite a bit of my life chasing achievements without having backed up and thought to myself, are those achievements really what I want? Do they line up with my values? Do they line up with my strengths? Do they line up with my authentic self and where I want to go? So like I said, it was kind of this evolution, but it's all of those pieces that added up together through my lifetime that came into this space where I really wanted to establish this coaching practice so that I would be here for women who found themselves kind of in that same spot of coming to a transitionary space within their life and saying, there's got to be something more to it than this. Something doesn't feel quite right, and I'm ready for that next piece.
I love that. I love that you are, and you stayed in your corporate career and done this. So I honor you for that. That's a big accomplishment in and of itself. I know how hard that is. I know how much time it takes. So I appreciate that you've come from that space and you're still in that space. So let's talk about what you call the driven woman, so our viewers can recognize themselves or maybe even a loved one in that description. How does she appear to us, and what might she be saying to herself that we never hear?
The driven woman. I was raised by many of them. I've surrounded myself by many of them. And I watched them. And when you watch that driven woman, you really see someone who is capable. Like the first word that comes to mind is just capable. They're able to get it all done. You never see them fall. And I say that, with that sound behind it, you never see them fall. And while that can all look so great, what you come to realize later, whether you are one yourself or you get to see those women that you've surrounded yourself with in their more vulnerable moments, is on the inside, they're no different than you and I. So as you're watching them carry that all and look like they all have it together and they're achieving and they're successful, on the inside, they're just thinking, I'm trying to keep up on work and home and, in my marriage or my partnership, with my kids, with my housework, they're really running in a depleted space. And the more that they extend themselves towards everything that they're trying to get done, the less that they're focusing on themselves. The more that they're trying to succeed or to achieve, the more they're trying to be successful, the more they find themselves in traps of pleasing others, meeting other people's expectations. They ever stop to think what their expectations were and why they had those expectations. So really on the inside, they're in this kind of overthinking, scattered, lack of focus space that you don't see. You don't see that on the outside when you look at them. And they're exhausted. And they're just trying to find a way just up and out of that, up for some air. Because they have all of these things going on. They can't imagine that they would want to drop any of those things. So how do they find that space to breathe? And that's really what it is, just breathe.
I'm glad you just said that. Yeah, it's finding the space to breathe. We're going to talk more about that. I know we are. um, okay, so the driven woman, we all know them. I suspect that you and I both have been um, maybe called that
Mhm.
at some
Yep.
time in our lives, right? Because I remember people saying to me, how do you do everything that you do? How do you do it? How do you do it all? And it was probably at those times where it appeared that I was doing it all really, really well. But on the inside, I was struggling. I was doubting
Mhm.
myself. I
Mhm.
I was a perfectionist at heart. I was a people pleaser. And I love what you said,
Mhm.
living up to other people's expectations of us, right? And when we
Yep.
stop and think about that, the question is, are we living by someone else's expectations, maybe even someone else's values, and
Yep.
compromising our own?
Yes.
Yeah, so I love that you said
Yes.
that.
What people don't think of that as is it sounds harsh, but it's a concept of self-loss and self-abandonment. The more that we extend ourselves towards others, the further we get from ourselves and who we
When
knew
there isn't a
ourselves to
balance, right? When there isn't the
be.
balance,
Mhm.
right? Yeah, so that's so true. Okay, so
And I wanted
let's
sorry, I wanted to
go
touch
ahead.
on something you said because you
Yeah.
said we've probably both been called driven, right? It actually just came up the other day. I had someone mention it, and I had to point out to them because a lot of this work is in self awareness. I had to point out to them that that drive, I love it, but I've also learned that it can be my worst enemy
Mm,
as well as my saving grace. So it's just being aware in the moment of that ability that you have. How are you using it? Which direction are you taking it? What is getting your energy? So there's light and shade. There's light and shade to all of this.
right, absolutely. Good point. Very good point. All right, so let's just talk about why self care is so important.
Like you had mentioned, I say I'm taking the cliche out of self care. And that really came from a personal space because self care has become a lot about, hot baths and bath bombs and manicures and facials. And those pieces absolutely have a place in self care. There's a space for it. However, if you're an overwhelmed, driven, do it all woman, when you take a bath, you might feel great for a moment, but that's really not going to be what has meaningful, lasting impact for you. It was a great moment, but it won't really carry you forward. I work with women on a wide scope of self care to create an individualized approach for them so that we are picking up on self care activities, which the way I define self care is engaging in activities for your whole self, mind, body, and spirit. We're making sure that we're looking at it in a very comprehensive way so that the activities that you're choosing, and choosing is intentional. The activities that you're choosing to put into your schedule, and we've already established it's a busy one, right? We want to make sure that we're using that time well so that you are becoming a healthier, more resilient version of yourself. And you, in turn, can then show up better for your people and priorities. People often fall into the trap of feeling that they need to extend themselves towards others and towards their to-do list um, to show love. Whereas if you're not putting that care towards yourself, if you're not putting that love towards yourself, you're not going to be able to show up fully. You will not be able to show up fully for your people and priorities. The more you care for yourself, the healthier you're going to be, and the more present you're going to be able to be for all of them.
Yeah, so that makes it really important. And the other thing that occurs to me as I hear you say that is no one else can do it for us.
They cannot.
We are, so if we don't do it for ourselves, it doesn't happen. And everyone around us will benefit if we take time to care for ourselves first. Yeah, that old oxygen mask
Mm-hmm.
metaphor that they use in the airlines. If we take care of ourselves first, then everyone benefits.
You know, and a lot of the people that I've worked with, there's a couple things that come up. So when you're not caring for yourself, um, you're more likely to show up in ways that you don't want to show up. So, you know, I'm thinking at the end of the day, you've worked all day, you're home with your family, homework needs to be done, dinner's being made, things are being cleaned up, you need to get ready for bedtime. If you don't have a routine in place to take care of yourself, by the time you get to that point in your evening, you're going to be more depleted, you're going to be more frustrated, you're going to be in a place where it's easier for you to snap. And then after you
Yeah.
snap, you feel badly because you snapped at the people that you love. And that's not how you wanted to show up in that moment. And it creates this cycle.
Right. And then when that kind of behavior happens, how you make them feel as a result of you not taking care of yourself, right? And we just need to take ownership of that. We need to take responsibility for that because that's important because how we make others feel are what they remember.
It is what they remember. So I mean you've got a twofold thing going on there. So it's a big trap in the people pleasing space to try to take ownership of how they react or how they feel. So then you get yourself wrapped up in that too of, oh, I caused that for them. And then the guilt compounds.
Mm,
But it's all in that space of taking care of you. If you take care of you, you're going to break that cycle that's occurring.
right. Okay, so a moment ago, you gave us your definition of self-care. Let's just go through that a little bit deeper. For you said it's the activities you choose to do to
Hmm.
include in your busy schedule. Let's talk a little bit more about that definition.
Well, the engaging in activities for optimal whole health, mind, body, and spirit. We do look at that. So in a bit, we'll kind of talk a little bit about those 7 ways of self care that I walk through.
Okay.
But there's 3 of them that I kind of consider the legs of a table. And those 3 really relate to that mind, body, and spirit.
And
So when
that's
I'm talking
what you talk about is the whole person, right?
whole person, whole
Yeah.
person, because you are a whole person in every place that you show up, in every place that you apply yourself to, you're bringing your whole self there. And the more comfortable you can feel with yourself as a whole person, the more comfortable you feel showing up as your whole self in your spaces. And it creates this beautiful, authentic alignment for you where you're struggling a lot less with what people think of you, how they perceive you, and just bringing yourself forth naturally, which is really the only state to operate in a healthy way.
Yeah. I call that harmony.
Hmm.
Yeah.
It
Yeah.
is. It is.
Well, that's the way it feels, right? Because it everything just seems to flow so much
Hmm.
better and easier, more gracefully, right? That's that ease and grace that I talk about all the time.
Hmm.
So, what that means then is when we think about our self care practices, I know you're going to get into this in a minute, but we need to be thinking about self care practices that align with and honor our body, our mind, and our spirit.
Hmm. Hmm.
So it's not just the bath, the massage, the facial, right? The bath, the massage, the facial, body, maybe for a little bit, the mind, if we can turn our
They
mind
can
off and
spread over.
relax,
Hmm.
right? If, yeah,
Hmm.
yeah, okay. All right, so body, mind, and spirit, we need to figure out how to create a self care routine that helps us fulfill all of those in a way that replenishes us. Okay.
Yeah, and I mean, as you were talking, something came to mind. So, you know, we talk about what it is and what it isn't. One of the main things I cover in the beginning is sometimes it's not so much the activity that you choose, it's the permission that you give yourself to act. So when I'm working with these overwhelmed, driven, do-it-all women, they haven't even at that point given themselves permission
Yeah.
to do anything. So first, it's giving yourself permission to embrace self-care, to understand that it's not selfish, that it is in fact what's going to make you a more healthy, whole person when you're addressing your to-dos and your people, giving yourself permission to act. And then we become concerned with which piece is going to be best for them. But there's some work in the beginning.
Yeah, I think you're so right about that. And we hear this all the time. Self-care is not selfish.
Mm-hmm.
Yet that sense of selfish is something that I think a lot of us is ingrained from childhood about,
Mm-hmm.
share your toys, don't be selfish. It starts
Mm-hmm.
there, something that's so innocent, and, is not meant to, I'm sure, when my mother said it, I know she didn't mean that I should grow
Right.
up thinking that being selfish is bad, right? I know she didn't mean that, but I think that's what
Right.
we grow up thinking.
Yeah, you pick up these messages.
Yeah, yeah. All right. So I know you've talked about 7 areas of self-care. So why don't you take us through those?
I will do that. First, I'll say that when we go back to that mind, body, and spirit, and spirit, you can use any word there. There's people use soul, inner knowing, higher self, intuition. There's a lot of different words you can put in that space. So I don't want anyone to get hung up on that word. But in that mind, body, spirit, um, we are equally all three of those. And very often we let our minds kind of take the wheel. Mind gets to run the show. It becomes very overactive, and I think that's where we often find ourselves stuck is in overthinking and stress and frustration. And by doing that, we're effectively silencing body and spirit. We're not listening to what our body is telling us in those moments. We're not listening to what our inner knowing is telling us in those moments. So I really help women to live a more intuitively led life by balancing those three pieces so that we're giving them all their space to function. And the way that I do that is through the self-care focus. So I'd come up with the 7 areas of self-care just because it's a really great place to start. It really broadens people's minds as to what self-care means, because you wouldn't think of these things necessarily when you think of self-care. So I will mention here that on my website, that'll be in the notes and that we'll mention at the end, my website, I do have a free guide called 7 Ways to Self-Care. So if you're listening to this, don't feel the need to rush and write down notes. You can download that for yourself and follow along later. And also, 7 can feel overwhelming. So if you're already overwhelmed, driven, do it all, and I say 7 areas of self-care, you're thinking, oh, great. So not only do I need to find 1, but now I need to find 7. That's not it. So when we go through these 7 areas of self-care, what we're really looking to do is identify which space is going to have the most impact for you to work on first. So we can find a very small activity within one of those spaces that will just kind of start that self-care journey for you. So I'll list them, and then we can touch on them as you wish, Maria. But it's physical self-care, psychological, emotional, social, occupational, environmental, and spiritual. So these are the 7 areas of self-care that I'm working with women on right off the bat.
Okay, I love that. So I think what I'm hearing you say, Angela, is that um, they don't have to pick one from each one of those, but they get to
Correct.
choose and decide which area would help them the most. And
Yes.
so
And
this makes it a very individualized kind of journey,
yeah,
and they get to choose themselves. I
Yes,
love
and I
that.
love approaching it this way because I think one of the traps that many women will fall into when they start embracing self-care is looking at what other people have done and then doing it for themselves, and then they find that it
Yes,
doesn't quite fit.
right.
So if you know that someone's really into meditation, and you try it and you just say, "God, this isn't for me right now,"
Yeah.
maybe someday it will be, but maybe it just isn't for you right now. Maybe that's not the best place to start. Journaling is another one. Journaling, the benefits to it are outstanding. But if you try a journaling practice and it doesn't fit, you scrap it all together and you figure
Or it
this
feels
just
hard,
doesn't work for me.
right? If it feels hard,
Yeah,
it's probably not for
yes.
you right now, right? Yeah.
Right,
It's
right.
like,
And there's
people
another
who
part.
jog, right? I'm not a jogger. I
Mhm.
could not jog alongside
I'm
them and feel good about it at all.
right.
Yeah,
I'm not either. Well, and
yeah,
the other thing, the other beautiful thing is there's a sneakiness to these activities that while there are 7 areas, you can pick up on one small activity that actually reaches across a few of them. So this is just a really great guide to get you started somewhere. Because a lot of what I work with women on, it does take a little bit of practice. It does take a little
yeah,
bit of routine, just like a muscle that you have to build. You have to patiently implement this small activity and give it a shot, and then just let it build and grow from there.
yeah. And I think that's such great advice. Start small, start with one,
Mhm,
try to implement that regularly, whether it's into your morning routine before you get started with work, or it's your noon routine because that's when you're most anxious, frustrated, stressed, whatever that is,
mhm,
or it's your evening routine after you're finished work and before you go
mhm,
engage with your family again. So there are so many options to choose from here in
mhm,
self-care. So I love that you've given us, seven different areas that we can think about which would be most impactful for us, and
mhm.
then start small, and then decide, which one and when. When do we integrate that
Yeah.
into our lives in a routine? Love
Yeah,
that.
in the coaching package, there's actually a section that we spend on that, where we look at how their time is currently being spent, um,
Mm,
so that we know what we're working with going forward. We know where we can change, delegate, make room for. We know when they're feeling their best,
yeah.
um, when maybe they're more apt to catch a little bit of peace as they dive into any of this. But we're really looking again completely individualized, what's going
Yeah.
on with them and how this might best work.
Yeah, you just said a great word too. Peace, the whole in my humble opinion, and I talk about self-care with my clients all the time. I'm a big proponent of it. And I've learned the hard way like you have. But
Hmm.
that word peace, it's peace of mind, peace of body, and peace of spirit. And when you have that peace, when you can find it, capture it, figure out how you can get more of that,
Yes.
because that's the goal. Love it.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
All right. So we are headed now into the last segment of our show. This is where my guests bring us practical tips and strategies that we can take away today and implement into our own lives. It might be something you've heard before, but you've never tried, or something you've tried, and here's a new twist on it that you can try again. So, this is the reason we call the show Tips for the Transition. So, Angela, please help us understand what your tips are today. What's your first one?
Perfect. The first one, I'm going to carry forward with that 7 ways to self-care guide. The reason that I'm going to do that is because those 7 areas that I listed, under each of those, I give a brief description of what it is so that you can round that out, as well as a few prompting questions. And what those prompting questions will help you to do is identify, along with the description, if that is something that's calling to you. And I really do want to focus in on that calling to you, because there might be one that you read and you think, I could use that. And, you could hear it, take that deep breath, because it's a place that you'll identify and think, if I could get just a touch of that, I think I could start to feel so much better in my days. So that's that one tip, is go ahead and grab that guide so you can work through those 7 ways of self-care and identify which one might give you just that one deeper breath today.
Great advice. Go get Angela's free gift for you today, so that she can give you some more ideas. Okay, what's number 2?
Number 2, it's something that I like to use in moments where I can feel I'm starting to feel tense or overwhelmed or frustrated. So if I have identified that whatever I'm doing, I'm feeling that, I've even got it written on a note on my desk over here to remind myself. I stop, I take a couple of deep breaths, I pause, and I ask myself, what am I doing? And in what am I doing? It's not like, what am I doing? It's a very intentional question. What am I doing right now? So that I can bring awareness to what it is that I'm working on or what it is that I'm addressing. I then ask myself, why am I doing it? And this has really helped me to identify if that thing that I'm doing right now is aligned with me. Does it align with my values? Is it something that needs to be done right now? Is there a way that I can do it differently? So why am I doing it? And then I can make a very intentional choice to continue or to shift. So what am I doing? Why am I doing it? And then continue or shift. It just creates more intention in your actions.
That's brilliant. Great questions. And it's not, what am I doing?
Right. But what am I doing?
So be careful of
am
your
I
tone of voice.
Am I mindlessly scrolling social media?
Yeah, what am I doing?
And it's causing this feeling with me. And then why am I doing that? I mean, that's one that I'm probably going to shift.
Love
I could be doing something else.
And it just occurs to me, you have to be careful about your tone of voice when you're talking to yourself.
Very.
So it's it's non-judgmental, right?
Yes.
It is with grace, right? You're giving yourself grace.
Yes.
And you're not beating
compassion.
yourself up. Compassion, absolutely. So speak to yourself that way as you ask the questions that Angela is suggesting. I love that. All right, what's number 3?
Number 3. I'm choosing between 2 in my head, so if you see me going.
You have
it's
you
along
might have
the
room
same
for 4.
It's number 3, I'm going to say, is along the same lines, but just a little bit different shift if you don't want to go through all of the question asking. But it's in those same moments. It's in those same moments where you're feeling overwhelmed. And of course, I focus on this because that's who I'm working with. And I find myself in those spaces too. I'm feeling overwhelmed. Again, I'm going to stop. There's so much to be said for just stop. 2 deep breaths. And I even do this. I even hold a finger up and I say, okay, what do I want to do next? So there's another question, but what do I want to do next? Because a lot of the people I work with in the same space as me, where you've got so many things going on at one time. In fact, it was just last week, I found myself in one of those where I had to say, oh my goodness, stop. I wrote down 10 things off the top of my mind that were things I wanted to have done 5 minutes ago. So I offloaded those and thought, okay, I can't do 10. What can I do? What is my one best next step? It can be tiny, but it stops you from circling in that overthinking mind that you have and allows you to choose one best next step, not 10.
That's another brilliant piece of advice. So you're right. So often we get ourselves in this whirlwind of, our mind is just going a mile an hour.
And when you're in that driven space, you wanted to have it all done 10 minutes ago, right?
That's
Because
who we
you already
are,
have other
right?
things you want to keep
Right.
moving with.
Yeah. So, write down all the things that you've got going on in your head and then pick the one. And I would say pick the one, much like we say, pick the self-care technique that has the most impact for you. When you're in that overwhelmed or whirling state, pick the one thing you can do next that will have the most impact.
Mm-hmm.
So, or maybe yeah, we could go through all kinds of scenarios on this one,
Well,
but
yeah, because
I think
depending on the self-care routine that you build, there are actually many that you can use throughout your day. So there might be very intentional times that you use them, but in the points where you are feeling frustrated, tense, overwhelmed, stressed, whatever it is, there are quite a few that you can pull from your toolbox in those moments to use
yeah,
at that time.
yeah. And I talk a lot about the power of the pause, and that's what you just said. There's so
Yes.
much, there's so much to be said for just stopping, just taking that
Mm-hmm.
pause, taking some deep breaths, which is a natural calming technique, right?
Mm-hmm.
Just bring some calm
Mm-hmm.
into it. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, the power of the pause. And if you don't pause, you just keep going, right? So you gotta take that pause. Good, 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 good stuff. Good stuff. Do you have one more? You have such good stuff. I don't want to stop.
Oh, thanks. Well, I can. We had been chatting that just the other day. Um, I wrote a blog post about working through defeat and discouragement, and bringing stuff. I brought a little bit of personal into it, which can be difficult for me to do. I'm still working on being a recovering people pleaser, a recovering perfectionist. So sometimes it's hard to admit that you get into tough spaces too. But I was just having a hard day, and I felt like everything was an I can't. And I know better, but it doesn't prevent you from going into those spaces. So I wrote just a really quick article about 6 tips for working through defeat and discouragement. And the first one, and I'll keep them brief, is just give yourself permission to feel it. So often when you feel that defeat, there's that inclination to say, you're fine, pick up the pieces, move on. I can't is not in my verb. Just give yourself permission to feel defeated for a moment. Don't let it take you over. Don't let it define you, but just, I'm feeling kind of defeated right now, and I'm feeling defeated because of this. And just give yourself that space. And then there's the self-compassion. So this came up just moments ago between us, self-compassion. Don't speak to yourself in a way that you wouldn't speak to your loved ones. When you practice compassion for others, you need to be practicing compassion for yourself. Otherwise, how can you show up compassionately in any space? So give yourself the same grace and love that you would give to anyone else in that situation. So picture them in that moment. What would you say to them? How would you sit beside them? How would you support them? Give that to yourself too. Drop the stories, drop the catastrophizing is the other one. So get into a moment of I can't, and you're thinking, well, I can't, and I'll never, and I might as well quit. And all of a sudden you're so far away from yourself. Just drop those stories. Be realistic. It's one moment, and you will get through that moment. It doesn't define your whole lifetime. Lean into your routines. This is the big one. So when we're talking about these self-care routines, your routines are what help keep your stress baseline at a healthy level. So don't abandon them. If it's meditation, journaling, exercising, sketching, praying, any of these things, lean into your routines because they will help you to keep that really solid foundation as you're working through that defeat and discouragement. Remember that this will pass. You've had hard moments before in your life, and you got through them. You got through them just fine because here you are today. So just remember that you've been through hard times before. You'll get through this one too. We talk about emotions and feelings being like clouds that pass through the sky. They come in, they appear, they go away. It's the same concept here. It will disappear. You will be good. And then there's one last step that I only recommend if people really have the capacity for it. Where your capacity is. So if those first few were great and that's what you have, perfect. Otherwise, it's visualize and take one small step. So in that defeated moment, if I'm able to calm myself and again breathe, so just a couple deep breaths and I close my eyes and I think, this is what I feel like right now, but what do I want to feel like? What would I rather feel like right now? And then I just visualize how I would be showing up in that moment, what I would be doing to feel that way. So you just kind of meditate on it for just a moment. And then when that's done, you look at it and think, well, what's one small step I can take forward? So if I decided that I wanted to feel more calm, how can I feel more calm? Maybe my answer is be more present. I need to stop, ruminating about the past. I need to stop creating an anxiety story to my future. Instead, I just need to be present and I need to be in my moment and I need to embrace what that is at that time. And that will help me to be more calm. But that visualizing step just really helps you to start showing up in that way that will make you feel better in that moment.
Well, that is a jam-packed tip.
Oh,
Folks, you got
you opened the door for me.
6 in 1. I know. That was dangerous, but that was beautiful. I loved it. So and we're running short on time, but I am so grateful that you shared all of this with us today, Angela. It's so important that busy women, career women, women who are maybe out of work now and stressed about that. This self-care stuff is really important, and it doesn't have to cost you a thing to do it. Not
Not a
1
thing.
cent, not one red
Mm-mm.
cent. So, yes, to go out and have a massage or a facial, that will cost you. But that's not what we're talking about here. We are
Mm-mm.
talking about real self-care that has huge impact in our lives, that only costs you some pausing, some breathing,
Yeah.
and some discerning, choosing what it is that will help you most in
Mm-hmm.
the 3 areas that Angela talked about and in the 7 areas, right?
Mm-hmm.
So body, mind, spirit, and in those 7. And you're going to get
Mm-hmm.
Angela's free gift. So, Angela, tell us where they can get it. And I'm going to drop it below here.
Yeah, sure. It's my website. So www.angelamckayllc.com. So it's ANGELAMCKAYLLC.com. And on there, there's a button right there to grab your free guide. Just enter an email address and it's sent straight to your inbox. At the bottom of the page, I also have the links to all my socials.
That's such a powerful free gift. Thank you so much for bearing gifts for our audience today and for sharing your perspective on self-care. I love it. I hope our audience has gotten so much from it. Angela, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you so much for the opportunity. I was really looking forward to this time to be present with you.
Oh, that's great. Thank you. All right. And those who are watching and listening, I so appreciate that you're a part of our community. As I said at the top of the show, if you want to get more information from Angela or from me, there are all kinds of links that you can check in on. There are um, websites and emails and downloads that may help you wherever you are today. So we want to help you move from there to where you want to go, wherever that is. Plus, I invite you to continue this conversation if you'd like to in my private Facebook group called the Career Transition Roadmap. The link for that is also below. So, and let's meet again here every Wednesday, next Wednesday, 10 a.m. Mountain Standard Time. I believe it's our time to thrive. Will you join me on that ride? Until next time, I'm Maria Tomás-Keegan, turning transition into triumph.